Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Couchside Conversations. I'm Kevin Rex, and I'm joined by my colleague and partner, Stacey McKinnon. And today we're talking about giving or getting inheritance, our best advice. I'm excited to talk about this. It is a topic where I think truly we do some of our best work and make some of the biggest impact. Our clients are regularly wondering when to give. Do I give while I'm alive? Do I wait till I pass away? Can my kids handle it? Like, there's so many questions. What's the right structure to give? And so talking about that's important. But then on the other side of the coin, receiving, right?
Yeah.
When you get inheritance, so many people don't know what to do. I looked up a stat, it's really interesting, I don't know if you know, but 1/3 of Americans, when they receive inheritance, spend all of it in the first 2 years. Right. And I think it's the Google advice.
I know.
It's they pay off their home mortgage, they do things that maybe they shouldn't because they really just don't know. They have this windfall and have never had that before.
And there's really no right answer. I mean, that's why the Google advice is so bad, is because it depends on your values and how much you get, and do you have kids, do you not have kids, do you have charities you're interested in donating to? I mean, there's so many different dynamics at play that I feel like the only right way to do it is to talk it out.
Yeah, you have to have a plan.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so today we're going to talk it out.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
I love
So
that.
I'm going to have you kick it off. I would love to hear a little bit about how you work with your clients when you're discussing giving away assets and inheritance and their giving strategies.
Well, let's start with the toughest of the conversations, which is the question that most clients ask: should I give to my kids while I'm alive? And there's so much, I think, fear and uncertainty around this. And you and I were talking about maybe where that comes from. And we're talking about pop culture, movies and TV shows, like the movie Billy Madison, or maybe like the Paris Hiltons of the world, or the Hills, the like Laguna Beach reality show. All of these characters were what we would term as like trust fund babies. And I feel like when these like movies and TV shows came out, every parent in America was like, no, don't let my kid be like that.
Well, it was reality, right?
Yeah,
So it was like they didn't want it to be their reality.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this like fear of my kid is going to become a trust fund baby if I give them money during my lifetime. And the truth of the matter is most of our clients did an amazing job raising their children who are now young adults. And for the most part, if you give to your kids, they're not going to become trust fund babies. In fact, there's some other big benefits to it too that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I certainly think that acknowledging this fear is an important one, and really asking yourself the question of like, is my child though maybe actually more responsible than I'm giving them credit for?
Sure. And I think when you go back to those movies and those reality TV shows, trust fund babies, most of them started out at birth getting everything they ever needed or wanted, and having a personal trainer and nanny and all that stuff. Like at a certain point, your kids have demonstrated responsibility, work ethic, just integrity and compassion. Like we know our children, right? To a certain level where they're not just going to convert or change overnight. And in fact, I think we see the opposite, where kids that do inherit large sums of money, they're a little paralyzed at times too, because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So we don't see them just go buy Ferraris and the things that maybe parents are fearing.
It's also hard at age 30, 35 to teach your children principles and lessons anymore. At that point, they're kind of formed, they're living their own lives. And so the decision to help them or give them money is, I think, a little more of a values-based decision versus a fear they'll be spoiled or they won't earn their way. But it is valid. I also talk to clients and they share with me that they worked really hard for it, so they want their children to work really hard for it. And I think that that's a fair statement. I mean, you played football in college, I've played sports, and I think about any really good sports team, there's an element of suffering to get what you want that I don't think is a bad suffering. I mean, don't make your kids suffer to the point where they're on the street or they don't have food. But there's an aspect of like grinding through it that when you make it, it's just like that much better, right? And I find that sometimes if you completely stop the suffering, you actually miss out on giving your children that moment of confidence, that moment of success, that belief in themselves that they can actually do it. And so I do respect the concept of, I worked really hard and so they should too. It's just how far are you going to take it? And are you going to take it to the place where your children are not enjoying their lives and they're miserable and they're depressed and unhappy? I mean, there's a way to give them a little bit to help them through it too.
Doesn't have to be an all or nothing.
No.
So yeah, and we can talk about some of the structures and ways to implement giving where you're not just saying, here's a lump sum of money, and we can talk about that here in a minute. But I agree with you. It's finding that balance where maybe it's supporting their rent, or maybe it's helping pick up some costs of what their children are going through, which just takes a little bit of pressure off, where it's not going to say, oh, I can quit my job and, move out of the country or any of that stuff. So it's finding that balance that's right for each individual and their family.
Yeah, and there's a lot of our clients that say, hey, my child needs to not work for a few years while the kids are young to raise the kids. And so can I gift to them and help them financially so that they can work part-time or they can take a little bit of time off? Because our value system is I want my kids to be present with the grandchildren as they're raising them. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a really good idea. And I don't know in that situation if you need to stick with your guns of the I did it, so should you. I think that there's a way where if you have the affordability to make it a little easier on your kids, I think that's really good. The last fear I would just mention that a lot of people have in giving during life is just that they're going to run out of money. And unfortunately, this is the hardest one because we've both done a lot of financial plans where the results did show that. And so while their love language might be giving to their kids, financially speaking, that's really hard to do. And so maybe we brainstorm other ways that they can give and fulfill that bucket and make sure their children feel really loved, but also preserve the financial side. Because unfortunately, what they don't really realize is if they spend all their money, then their kids have to pay for them. And that might be actually worse for their adult children. So those are some things that I think are maybe some of the considerations when it comes to giving during your life. But there's a lot of positives too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think sticking to a plan and knowing where you're at is crucial. And those are two things that are negatives, but I think you can tolerate them or handle them by planning or having conversations with your kids. So this might sound like I'm biased, but I definitely lean towards giving while you're alive, and we'll talk about that in the way that those hurdles, we overcome them, and now how do we truly experience life? How do we get the most joy out of life? How do we help our kids in a world where there's mental health, where there's therapy and things that there are costs that maybe weren't there when the older generation was growing up. Or I was joking about this. My son plays baseball. He's a mediocre batter, and one of our friends is like, "Hey, I have a batting coach for you. He's the best. He'll change your son's game all around." So I called the coach. $200 an hour. And I was like, okay, so my son's just going to be a mediocre batter forever. It's one of those things where life is expensive. We live in a place where we want to provide for our kids and our family. So to be able to do some of those things, and as a parent, to be able to maybe provide that, if my parents could provide that for my son, if that was something they valued, or to pay for some of the medical help or concerns or things that we're going through, it just makes our lives a lot easier.
I mean, statistically speaking, our parents were 30% wealthier at our same age. So think about that for a moment. Like, we're 30% poorer, for lack of a better word, which just means that the world is more expensive. I did a financial plan for a couple with kids the other day, and we were looking through their budget and just trying to find anywhere to reduce their budget because they wanted one parent to stay home. And I was looking through it and I could not figure out how to make it less than $150,000 a year of just expenses, mortgage needs. There was some clothing, some auto, some insurances in there, but I could not make it less than $150,000. And I just thought to myself, wow, in Southern California, you can't really live off of less than $150,000 after tax. That's $200,000 pre-tax. And so when we talk to our clients about gifting to their kids during their lifetime, I think this reality of how expensive it is to be in your 30s and 40s, especially in Southern California. If you can alleviate that burden now versus giving it to them later, I mean, it could make all the difference in their life.
Yeah, and I like to talk a lot about just the money we make. The reason we work is to get some experience or some joy, some help, and provide some kind of service to somebody, right? Having a big number in your bank account doesn't bring joy necessarily. Maybe it brings a little peace of mind, but I like to think about what experiences are we giving up, what opportunities to, whether it be travel or, again, relieve the pressure for your children. Like, if the way I want to live my life is I want to see the good that I'm doing. I'd rather see the charity provide services to people in need versus pass away and then my legacy never really be seen or known to me.
Yeah.
So I think for those that are kind of considering when to give, would it bring you joy to see the difference that your money's making, to see the experiences that you and your family get to have together? Yeah,
if you have enough, if you know and you feel confident that you're taken care of for your life, including long-term care and your basic living expenses, and you have extra, I mean, I think a lot of adult children would say, hey, I'd rather do experiences and memories with you here and now. I'd rather make deposits into the memory bank versus the bank account. And so spend that money on, like, let's make memories together. I don't need it when I'm 60 years old. I think it'd be better if we could like enjoy life and wealth today. And so that's something that with proper planning, I think it's a real consideration, and it can bring like such value and such joy to people's lives too.
Yeah, I've been pushing my mom, and her fun saying now, she goes, hey kids, we're going skiing. And like, she thinks it's so funny, but she picks up my kids, and it's spending her kids' inheritance. So she's spending, you know, potentially my money. And my mom is someone who, she's, you know, a hoarder when it comes to money. She's ultra conservative, worried about the future. But when she takes my daughter to get her nails done and spends an ungodly amount to, you know, whatever, $100 on getting your nails done, but the joy that they have, and my daughter's telling stories, and like, my mom will spend that money all day long. And so it's become this thing where I used to have to kind of encourage her or push her. And now she's at a point where she finds so much joy in it, where she's taking my son to lunch, she's going and getting nails done. Like those things matter so much.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that money would just grow in the account. I would get it hopefully in a long time from now. My kids are grown up, but they've missed out on all these experiences with their grandparents. So
it's so much more meaningful.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And that's why you work hard to earn money.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, there's also a door number 3, right? There's the, like, give your kids money now, give it to them later, and we'll talk about structure for inheritance later. But then door number 3 is kind of referencing the book Die with Zero, which you and Chris did a podcast episode on this recently. Tell me a little bit more about just like the Die with Zero concept, which I think it just means like you spend it.
Yeah, it really, it's spend it. And it doesn't mean you have to spend it on yourself. It's some of the things we talked about. It could be spending it on charity, spending it on your children, your friends, experiences. But the concept of the book is really like, there's 3 things that ultimately matter. You have your time, you have your health, and you have money. And in life, it's really imbalanced because you're young, you typically have a lot of time, you have a lot of health, so you can typically do a lot of things, but you don't have a lot of money to afford it. Then as you get older, now you have more wealth, but your time is scarce, and unfortunately, almost every day our health gets worse and worse. And so there's this time frame, and it's typically between like your mid-30s to mid-40s, where you're at your peak time, peak health, and hopefully you can be at your peak financial situation. And it's doing those experiences that bring you the most joy. And I just had this recently where I went skiing for the first time without my kids, and I was like, I'm gonna get 30,000 feet in. And I told this story on the podcast too, but it was like, I was so tired.
Tired.
Like, I remember 20 years ago, you couldn't stop me.
I'm done skiing at 2 now.
We ended up being done at 2. But like the reason being, I had all this time, I had all the ability to do it, but my health, my age, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And so like my dad or my mom, like you could give them free trips to fly to Europe, and like, they would think twice about going because it's a lot of work for them to get on a plane and do all these things. And they're still, you know, relatively young, but it just gets harder. So the whole concept of the book is spend it while you can, when you can, and whether it be on yourself or your children. And so you go back to the hardest time raising kids or growing your career is late 20s, early 30s into your 40s. Most people don't get their inheritance until they're in their 50s. So they've already gone through that struggle. They've already passed those peak enjoyment years. So the book really challenges you to say, look, if your kids are going to get it anyways, they might get less dollars today than they would in the future, but they're going to get more value out of those dollars.
Which I think is an important conversation around value, the value of time, the value of experiences. I feel like we have to address these things because I think we would spend our money differently if we were following our values sometimes. So an example might look like you create a bucket list for yourself where it's a whole entire list of all the things you want to do, and you just start spending towards that, and you ask your family to be involved in that, and you make those memories and they align with your values. Or maybe you do pay for a child to stay home if that makes more sense for them and they're young children at the time. Or maybe you pay for education. Like there's a lot of ways that you can let your values lead and then your money can follow it. I would also say that as you think about the Die with Zero concepts, valuing your time.
Yeah.
You can paint a room yourself or you can hire someone to paint it. And if you hire someone to paint it, you can go spend that time doing the things that you love. And I think we work our whole lives like to just gather. We're like squirrels. And then all of a sudden, like we have this amount of money and we think to ourselves, oh, it's the right thing to do to continue squirreling it away. Like it's almost like a mindset shift to no longer be like keeping the acorns with you, but now you're like giving the acorns away. And you actually have to train yourself how to do that. I feel like you have to make a conscious effort to say, it's not a bad thing that I'm not doing it myself. It's not a bad thing that I'm spending the money. It's actually like me putting my money where my values are. And I think that that's an important transition.
Yeah. How many times do we just tell our clients, we're going to send you the money.
Yeah.
If it builds up in your account, send it back.
Yeah.
But the hurdle of them saying, hey, Stacey, can you send me X amount of dollars?
Yeah.
They don't want to do it. It's hard. Like they ask permission. Can I have $10,000 out of my account? And you're like, this is what you worked so hard and saved for your whole life.
Yeah.
But it is that mindset shift, which is really interesting. Some of the other benefits though too, even structurally thinking. So from an estate planning standpoint, depending on the level of net worth, there is a huge benefit to starting to give and gift while you're younger, getting all of the future growth outside of the estate. And going back to one of the first concerns that you have is giving money to my children now. What if they just spend it? You can use things like irrevocable trusts where the money's being gifted outside of your estate for their benefit, but they don't necessarily get it right away. There can be parameters. Maybe they're just getting income. Maybe they have someone else who has control over when they take distribution. So there are ways to benefit the kids, keep protections in place, maybe benefit your future estate from reducing taxes in the long run.
Yeah.
But there's, I think just considering and thinking through those different options make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's really wise and smart. And like you said, there's protections in place. Like generally most trusts say you can use the money for health, education, maintenance, and support. And that in and of itself kind of protects you from like the overspending trust fund baby concept.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about giving during life. Now tell me a little bit about smart ways to actually give an inheritance. So you're setting it up for when you do pass. What are some wise strategies that you would call out?
So I think, one thing that you have to kind of think through is there's different assets to give. So there's, we typically think of someone just getting all of your wealth, but wealth can be bank accounts, it could be real estate, it could be assets that you own. And each one of those things come with different complexities and different things that you have to consider. Obviously, bank accounts, trust accounts, they have beneficiaries and they're more just transferred. But one thing even with those is what assets are inside.
Yeah.
We love alternative assets, but for certain families, those can create complications. And so thinking about what are the illiquidity terms? Is it right for my children to have those assets? You're also inheriting the advisor that comes with those assets, potentially K1. So there's different things that go with assets within those accounts. One thing we talk about with my parents, my mom, I said hoarding, but they have like their jewelry and their china and they have their great grandma's like, dining room table. And they're like, oh, you guys are all going to fight over this. And my sisters and I look at each other. We're like, none of us want this stuff. I hate to say that. And they're going to watch this and hate me for it. But none of us really want a china cabinet anymore. And I know there's sentimental value to them. And so being able to start setting up a plan where letting your kids kind of figure out who wants what, it makes things a little bit easier. I have 3 sisters. My mom has one wedding ring. I don't know if all 3 of them want that. How do you make some of these decisions as a family before, now you're mourning the loss of your parents and then you're trying to figure out how to settle assets? How many times do we see even the closest families, they start fighting over money, over decisions, and they all have the best interests. The next piece is real estate, which creates so many headaches around someone wants to keep it, someone wants to sell it. Is it even a good asset to keep? There's
Who's going to manage it?
Who's going to manage it, right? Where's the money going to come from to take care of it? And so like all of those different things, the more that you can lay out in a plan ahead of time, the better. And I know we have clients and people that are like, look, I'm going to be passed away. They can deal with it. They're getting assets. They can figure it out. I understand that to a degree, but the more planning you can do, just the smoother and easier it will be on families.
Yeah, it's too hard to leave people in the middle of mourning to then be like in a place where they have to argue with each other and have to debate what did mom or dad leave me and why did they leave me that versus that. I think if you can even write side letters that say, hey, these are my intentions, this is what I wanted to do, it just helps your family stay in a better place. I even think, speaking of just setting it up for your kids, setting them up with separate property trusts that they inherit money in. I think that's something that gets missed a lot in plans. People just say, oh, here, Johnny and Sally get their pieces. But if you set it up in your estate plan where they get separate property trusts, it saves them from really awkward conversations with their spouses. Because otherwise they get the money and then their spouses turn to them and they're like, so you're going to deposit that in the joint account? And if they have to be the ones to say, no, I think I'm going to keep it as separate property. And then the spouse is like, are you going to divorce me? Like it turns into like the trickle-down effect is not good. No. So it's better, I think, to potentially set it up where your kids inherit separate property trusts, and then they can say, this is the way that mom and dad did it. And these separate property trusts, you can spouses can access it, meaning like if you decide you want to share it with your family and use that money for your own lifestyle, most of them you certainly can, unless they're very restrictive. But for the most part, I think people set it up where there's flexibility in there. I think the part about that I really like is it just makes it so that you take the weird, awkward conversations away for your kids. So that's one recommendation. And one other recommendation, you mentioned real estate. If you're going to give your kids like a cottage or a beach house or a mountain house or something like that, please also set aside money to pay for said property, because that causes so much conflict where
like maintenance and stuff.
Yeah, you might think to yourself, oh, they'll just split the assets and then they'll both contribute back. But once those assets go into Johnny and Sally's account, to bring them back into a shared pot to fix the roof of the cabin is not an easy conversation. And so it's better to like have a bucket of money with a property that says, hey, this is the money for you to like renovate and fix it and pay the monthly bills and things like that.
That's great. One other concept too that I was thinking through is equal's not always fair, right? Or,
Yeah, sure.
fair is not always equal, I guess, in that. So thinking through, and you and I were discussing this, and I love this concept too, where at the end of someone's life, when they're looking at the balance sheet, it's a lot harder to be like, all right, you get 60%, you get 30%.
You were successful, so you get less money. They weren't successful, so they get more money.
Right? And so most people say, I could never give different children different amounts. And so what we were talking about too is like, but one way to do it where it isn't as obvious is helping those throughout their lifetime, maybe that need more support. So you have one child that's a doctor making good money, you have another child that decided to be a teacher, and one of their spouse stays home and it's just a little bit tougher. You can help give support during your lifetime. Again, another proponent to giving now, and then it could be equal at the end of life. And if someone went back and did the accounting, maybe it wasn't equal, but it's still fair because you have what the needs were. You have the support.
You got to take care of people.
So exactly. And I think it's a little bit easier to do it while you're alive versus just at the end where everybody's kind of looking at all the numbers at the same time.
I would have no problem with my parents giving more to my brother during his life if he needed it. Like, I think that would be completely fair. And I know if I really needed it, they would help me too. I don't need that to equalize. Like that, to me, that's like unnecessary math. But at the end, it would feel awkward. So I feel like that's a good strategy, like what you're saying. Like, fair isn't always equal. I think people need to remember that it's okay if you're helping one more than the other. It's fine.
Yeah,
it'll be fine.
It's your wealth, your money, and ultimately you're trying to do what you can, typically the best for everyone in your family. So.
Yeah. All right, so we talked a lot about how to give. Now let's talk about how to get, because you mentioned the statistic earlier where people spend it in the first 2 years. So you get an inheritance. What are your thoughts? What do you do?
Yeah, people think it's a lot easier to get, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with that. My first suggestion, or what comes to mind, is like, just pause, right? You think about, like, you hear lottery winners all the time going broke, and you come into this newfound money or this new wealth that you didn't have before, and you start making decisions, friends start showing up, family starts showing up. There's so many things that start happening right away. Keeping in mind, like, you just lost a parent or both parents, or that, you have like some mourning to do. Is that the right time to go buy a rental property or pay off your mortgage? And, definitely don't Google what should I do with my inheritance, but having some form of a strategy. But when it comes to the strategy, I think looking at high interest debt. So if you're somebody that has credit card debt, you have any other type of personal loans that are, call it 8, 9, 10, or up to 30% these days, like, getting rid of that debt, it doesn't feel good because you don't have anything right away, but it definitely creates more free cash flow and takes stress off your plate. I am also a huge proponent of, like, taking a trip or doing something special. Like, you're going through a lot. Like, maybe go to a special place that your parents would have loved, or take your family on a vacation that you hadn't been able to do before. So just spending time being present with your family and kind of mourning and taking time to heal in that situation. So paying off debt, taking a trip. And then from there, it's really like figuring out what's most important to you, but seeking advice, building out a plan. So knowing how to invest, looking at different assets. I brought up kind of buying a rental property. I'm passionate about this too. Like, everyone thinks that when you're rich, you should own a lot of real estate, or you become rich by owning a lot of real estate. It's not easy to be a landlord. And I've harped on this in the past. People think you buy a property and you just get mailbox money. It's not that simple, especially in California. Being a landlord's challenging. It's expensive. So then people look to go out of state and buy. That's not always the easiest. Again, just take a break, maybe wait a year before you make any,
Yeah. The Airbnb market is not as attractive as it was
It's
in 2020.
It's a different world.
Yeah. I did some math recently with a few clients on real estate that they inherited. And one of the challenges is that a lot of our families have built their legacy around real estate. The last 100 years have been really amazing in real estate. Grandparents and parents bought these properties in the 1970s for $48,000 that are now worth $2 million. And you look at those numbers and you say, oh, real estate's the best place to invest. That was then, I think this is now. So if we look at the real estate market today, I mean, multifamily, commercial properties, even some single family in different parts of the country, they're down 10, 20%. And so real estate going forward might not look like real estate in the past. So let's just pretend for a moment that real estate flatlines and it makes 0%. It doesn't go up at all for the next 10 years. And all you have is your income. Well, when you actually look at your income minus your expenses like property tax, homeowners association, insurance, which in California is so expensive.
If you can get it.
Gardening, like basics of maintenance, having a money just in case you do have that leak or you do have that plumbing issue. When I look at some of these real estate returns, they're like 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
And so actually working with somebody to say, hey, this is a property I just inherited. Here's the situation. Is it actually worth it to keep it? Or oftentimes you get what's called a step up in basis and you can sell the real estate tax free. And it might be better to just do that and invest in another way. You also mentioned the mortgage and paying off the debt and how that's not a wise decision. One thing that happens often is people use all of their liquid cash to pay off a mortgage and now all their money's in their home and then they don't have money to go do things in life. And so I think one of the things that people have to think through is like, how much real estate should I have for wealth creation and maybe some for income? But do I have also a third bucket, enough on the other side where my real estate doesn't limit me from enjoying my life?
Yeah, I think that step up in basis is huge, right? There aren't a lot of opportunities where you can make a ton of money and not ever pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
So that is an opportunity for someone to evaluate what does that property look like from the investment side, but then going back to what we talked about earlier, like how many parties own this property, right? Wouldn't it just be easier to kind of be rid, everyone get their cash, go their separate ways, invest it with their family in the ways that are going to be most important for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just simplifies your life.
Yeah, co-owning a property with your siblings is like, who's going to do the maintenance? Who's going to like clean the house? Are we going to have a house cleaner in the house? Is there an alarm system? And you're just like start going down and then it becomes another thing to do in life versus I think the intent is something to enjoy. And so back to like, I think if parents can set it up with intention and with that bucket of money and make sure it's clean, that's better. Okay, so final question for you, and this is a tricky one.
Awesome.
Do you consider inheritance you're going to be receiving when you do your own financial plan? Like for young people, should they think about how much they're going to receive in inheritance for their retirement?
That is tricky. And it's a good question. The way I approach it, and I think most of us at Modearn will approach it, is you don't consider it in the base plan. And when I talk about base plan, it's covering your everyday expenses, your housing, your food, just the things you need to live. Because if you should plan on considering the ability to do that on your own.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard because we see some kids that we work with, young adults that we work with, and they have inheritance coming and they're really struggling and they're trying to figure it out and they're like, can I take this trip? And you're kind of like, I really want them to take that trip, but the plan doesn't show that they can. So when it comes to some of those extras, like even if they know money's coming in, don't count on it, be able to do it independently. And then if and when it does come in, it's just the benefit on top of it. And this goes back even to like the more parents can kind of open up and share when they're comfortable, like with their children, so that they can make choices and not miss out on opportunities. Or maybe they could have gotten into their dream home that might have been a little bit more of a stretch, but they didn't know what was really coming down the line.
Yeah.
So yeah, the easy answer is I think don't count it. Put it in more of like an advanced scenario where you're like the what if. Okay, so this is me on my own. This is what if I get $1 million or $3 million or $10 million. But that way, if something ever happened, if your parents went through a health event and their money was less than they thought, or they decided to give it to somebody else, something changed, you're not stuck and left high and dry. So I don't think you can count on it until it's really written into a plan.
So I think that's really wise. And something that you mentioned, I just want to highlight, which is being a little bit more transparent with your kids about what they're going to get. I've had many, many situations where an adult child is struggling to make 401k contributions. Like they don't have enough. Remember I mentioned earlier, $150,000 after-tax baseline to survive. Maybe they don't have to struggle to make those 401k contributions if there's a degree of certainty about the inheritance that they'll receive. And so having some transparency actually maybe might take away some of the struggle from your adult children. And I think that's an important thing to consider as well.
Yeah, it frees up 10, 15% maybe of the income, or hey, you don't need to put as much money in the 529. We can help support you in college. All of those little decisions, it's going back to the first fear. It's not going to say, hey, I can quit my job and buy a Ferrari and move out of the country and be fine. But it does just kind of relieve a little bit of that pressure and makes it more tolerable for your kids, which I think most people want their kids to enjoy their lives as much as they can, right?
I totally agree with you. Yeah. Let's just decrease the pressure valve a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to move into what I think most people find to be their most favorite segment of the this or that. Yes. You ready to ask a couple questions?
Oh, I love this part.
So first question.
Okay.
This or that. Would you rather inherit a property with your siblings or get a check for $800,000?
A check for $800,000.
I knew you were going to say that.
I just don't, there's so many decisions to make about the property, including hiring somebody and paying them a commission and doing the whole shebang. And I just think that there's freedom in, my circumstances are different than my parents' circumstances. And so if I could just get a check and make my own decisions, that would be a blessing to me.
You don't want another job on top of helping run
no more jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so question for you. Let's say that you have adult children and you have to make the decision of giving during your lifetime or giving them an inheritance later. What do you do? I know the answer.
Yeah, I want to give to my children as much as I possibly can in a responsible way, in a way that does not give them the ability to freeload. But I'm hoping I live a long enough life to where I can see them mature into responsible young adults and middle-aged adults. So I want to support them as early and as often as I can.
Yeah.
All right, back at you. Would you rather to encourage your clients spend money on experiences or give cash for needs?
That's such a hard one. The experiences are so lovely because you can travel with your family and you can make those memories and you have those photos and Instagram reels and all of those things. And that's really meaningful. But I think there's a certain few needs that maybe should trump the experiences, like food, mental health, maybe education for grandchildren. If you can pay for some of those basic needs and decrease that pressure valve a little bit, that probably should trump experiences, but I love the experiences bucket too.
Yeah, and in a real world, it's not this or that. Maybe you can do a little bit of both.
That's true.
Kind of maybe a lower vacation with some needs, but yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great answer.
Okay, would you rather inherit a property with your family members that you co-manage, or would you rather just have your own property?
My own property. Yeah. It goes back to everything we talked about. Anytime you put family together that has to deal with money, financial decisions, properties, all the maintenance, it's not only your family members, it's their spouses and everything else that goes into it. So I love my sisters. They are my best friends. I would do anything for them. They do anything for me. I kind of dread the day that we have to make financial decisions together.
It just complicates it. Instead of having fun over Thanksgiving, you're like, hey, what are we going to do with that tenant that just moved out? So I think it probably preserves the relationships to not do that. Okay, last, this or that. Would you rather have your family split your inheritance equally between the 4 kids, or would you rather have them split it on who needs it most?
Darn it. I want to say that I want it to go to who needs it most.
Yeah.
That's easy to say now.
Yeah.
If my sister's getting more than me, I think myself or my other siblings would have an issue with it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to giving while you're alive. Yes. If they help her now or help one of my sisters now, 0 issues. But when I go back and I'm running the numbers. So
it's not that fun.
I want them to give it to who needs it most, but I know that would cause some issues. But,
good answer.
Thanks for sticking that one to me at the end. But we appreciate you joining us. Our intention is to put out content that truly helps you live your best life. So if you want to subscribe to our channel, hopefully you can watch some other videos that provides you with some content that really matters. Thanks for being here.
Wow.